Let me dive right into the thick of it, no beating around the bush. Our fifth anniversary, me and Sarah, found us at this cozy little spot downtown. The kind where they know not to bother you with menus because you've ordered the same two dishes since year one. We're laughing, clinking glasses, the whole 9 yards, talking about that trip to Paris and how we never did find her lost earring. It was perfect, you know? Fast forward a bit, and I'm climbing the ladder at this tech firm I've been grinding at for years. They finally notice me, and bam! Promotion lands in my lap. More cash, sure, but also more hours. Sarah's all smiles and champagne at home. But there's this look, like she's bracing for something. I tell her it's all part of the plan. Our future's looking bright. Enter Eva, this company gala, right? Swanky as they come. I'm there, trying not to feel out of place in my rented tux. And there she is. Eva, something about her just pulls you in. We end up sharing a dance. The room kind of faded away, and it was just the two of us under those dim lights. Felt like something out of a movie. So, this harmless thing starts up between us. Just lunches at first, in this little cafe tucked away from the prying eyes of the world. Eva's intriguing, full of stories that make my office cubicle life seem a world away. I tell myself it's just to break up the monotony of the day-to-day. No harm, no foul, right? Her birthday comes up, and I find myself buying this bracelet. Not just any bracelet, mind you, but the kind that makes your wallet weak. We meet up in this private park, away from it all, and her face when she sees it. I hadn't felt that kind of rush in years. But then, Sarah finds the receipt, innocently doing the laundry, and there it is, just peeking out of my jacket. I brush it off, saying it was for a team member who went above and beyond. She nods, but there's this flicker in her eyes. Doubt, maybe? I hated that flicker. The first Real lie came easy. Too easy. Working late, I said, heading to Eva's place instead. Her apartment's got this view, man, like you're floating above the city. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and yeah, more than that. Just a fling, I convinced myself. Nothing more. Each word, each action. It's like I'm watching myself from the outside, knowing I'm heading down a path I can't return from. But there's this thrill, this intoxication with the now that makes you forget about the price you'll pay tomorrow. And oh, how I'd pay. You ever get that feeling like you're sprinting down a path, heart racing, and you kind of want to stop but can't? That's where I was, stuck in this whirlwind with Eva, while home with Sarah felt like I was watching some old movie of my life. Sarah had started noticing, of course she did. We're sitting there, dinner on the table, and she's trying to reach me, saying she feels like I'm miles away. I brush it off, tell her work's just been a beast. But those eyes of hers, they're not buying what I'm selling. I changed the subject, talk about anything else. Felt like dodging bullets in slow motion. Then there's this weekend with Eva. We hit up this coastal resort, all luxury and no limits. It's like we're in our little world, where consequences don't exist. And damn, did I dive in headfirst. By the end of it, I'm convinced this thrill, this high, it's what I've been missing. Sarah's stability, our shared dreams, they start feeling like chains. Back home, the reckoning's waiting for me. Sarah's got this photo, me and Eva, laughing like fools, and the look on Sarah's face is like I've punched her soul. She asks straight up what's going on. And there I am, caught in the headlights, spilling everything but trying to dress it up like I'm just confused. Lost. She's standing there in our kitchen, the heart of our home, and lays it out, her or Eva. Her voice doesn't even shake, but I can see the storm in her eyes. It's this moment, right? A crossroads. And I, like the idiot I am, choose the storm. I tell her I'm sorry, that I need this excitement. God, even saying it felt hollow. Packing my bags was like moving through someone else's life. Each shirt, each photo I didn't pack, a memory of us I was leaving behind. I was chasing a high, and I knew it, but I couldn't stop. Walking out that door, Sarah's face was the last piece of home I saw, and it was breaking. Moving in with Eva, the city spread out like a promise below us. But promises, man, they're tricky. The buzz fades, and what you're left with is the silence of the morning after. Eva's place, once an escape, starts feeling more like a gilded cage. The thrill? Gone. leaving behind this question of what the hell I was chasing in the first place. So here I am, right? Living the dream, if the dream was to wake up feeling like you're in the wrong life. Every morning, the city's lights mock me a bit, reminding me of what I gave up for. What? A thrill that didn't last. And Sarah, she's out there, moving on, while I'm just starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, I've made the biggest mistake of my life. The night I saw Eva flirting with another dude at the bar, it was like a slap in the face with reality. There she was, all laughs and touches, and me, just a spectator to my own screw-up. It hit me hard, the realization that her loyalty was as thin as the excitement I'd chased after. I left the bar alone, the echo of their laughter a stark reminder of what I'd given up. Tried calling Sarah the next day. I must have stared at that phone for hours, willing it to ring to give me a shot at explaining, at begging. Really. But silence, that cold, unforgiving silence filled the apartment, every corner reminding me of the life I'd thrown away. Eva dropped the bomb not long after. I'm not looking for anything serious, she said, as if we were discussing the weather, not our lives. Suddenly, the apartment we shared felt like a museum of my mistakes, each room a testament to my foolishness. In desperation, I went to Sarah's workplace, some fool's hope clutching at me. But she wasn't there. She's taken some time off, her colleague told me, the disdain in his eyes making it clear I was the last person Sarah needed. I walked out of there feeling lower than I ever had. I found myself wandering to the park where Sarah and I first met. It's funny, the clarity that comes with loss. Sitting there on our bench, it all hit me, the depth of what I'd thrown away. Sarah wasn't just my wife, she was my best friend, my partner in every sense. And I traded that for a fleeting thrill. The Real kicker came at a mutual friend's party. I wasn't even sure why I went. Maybe some masochistic need to confirm my isolation. And confirm it did. I was on the outskirts, overhearing bits and pieces about Sarah, how she's thriving, finding herself again. Each word felt like another brick in the wall I'd built between us. Then, Eva's departure. She was leaving the country. She told me, excitement in her voice for this new chapter. No tears, no hesitation. Just like that, I was alone, staring out at the city lights from the apartment that felt more like a prison than home. So there I was, surrounded by the grandeur of a life I thought I wanted, realizing I was more alone than I'd ever been. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd chased after a mirage, and now, left in the desert of my own making, I couldn't help but wonder if the oasis I'd left behind was ever within reach again. The night of Eva's farewell party, I hatched this half-baked plan to make her jealous. Found myself a date, dolled up, thinking I'd stir something in Eva. But there she was, all smiles and goodbyes, not even flinching at my petty attempt. Watching her, indifferent, was like swallowing a bitter pill. I realized then, I wasn't even a blip on her radar anymore. Work, it's been a downhill slide. Once, that promotion was my ticket to the big leagues. Now, it's just a reminder of everything that's gone to hell. My boss, usually a chill guy, corners me one day, disappointment written all over his face. John, this isn't you, he says. And he's right, it isn't. Or maybe it's the me I've become. I started haunting the places Sarah and I loved. Our favorite park, the little coffee shop where we'd lazy away Sundays. Each visit was a punch to the gut, memories of better times taunting me. It was like walking through a museum of my own happiness. Now just relics of a past I'd burnt to the ground. In a moment of desperation, I wrote Sarah a letter. It was everything I couldn't say out loud, every apology, every plea for forgiveness. I left it at her doorstep, the autumn leaves swirling around me, a silent witness to my last-ditch attempt to reach her. But Sarah's silence was deafening. Days turned to weeks and not a word. I checked my phone, half hoping, half dreading. Nothing. That silence settled in my bones, a constant reminder of the chasm I'd created between us. Then, one idle scroll through social media and there she was. Sarah, looking radiant, a smile that reached her eyes. She was moving on, living her life without me. The contrast between her joy and my despair couldn't have been starker. I was happy for her, I truly was. But that happiness for her was a mirror to the void within me. The breaking point came at work. In the middle of a presentation, my mind just froze. Standing there, in front of everyone, the weight of my choices, my losses, just crashed down on me. I stumbled through an apology, mumbled something about needing a moment, and walked out. My colleagues, they didn't say anything. What could they say? I was a man undone by his own doing. Each of these moments, they're like markers on the road I chose, a road that led me away from everything I loved, from the person I once was. Now, standing amidst the wreckage of my choices, I can't help but wonder if there's a way back, or if this is just the beginning of a long, solitary journey through regret. In a last-ditch effort to claw my way out of the hole I dug myself into, I joined a local sports club. Thought maybe sweating it out, getting back into shape might clear my head, give me something close to joy. But every swing, every lap, it all felt like I was just going through the motions. There was no heart in it, just a hollow attempt to fill the void. Work wasn't any kinder. The decline in my performance finally caught up with me, and the boss delivered the news with a regretful look. Demotion. Just like that, the prestige I'd worked so hard for, the status I'd used to justify so much of my crap, gone. My office, once a testament to my success, now stripped back, smaller, a constant reminder of my fall from grace. The mirror became my least favorite part of the day. Looking into it, I hardly recognized the guy staring back. Where I used to see strength, now there was only this gaunt reflection, a physical manifestation of the stress and depression that had become my constant companions. It was like watching the decline of someone I once knew, except that someone was me. Running into Sarah's sister at the supermarket was a gut punch I wasn't ready for. The coldness in her eyes, that mix of pity and contempt, it said it all. There was no need for words. The familial bonds I'd once been a part of, now irreparably damaged. I left with a cart half full, her disdain echoing in my mind, a reminder of the ripple effects of my choices. Coming home to that empty apartment night after night, it's like walking into a tomb of my former life. The silence is deafening, a stark contrast to the laughter and warmth that used to fill the space when Sarah was here. It's in these moments, surrounded by the ghost of what used to be, that the weight of my decisions truly settles in. The day the divorce papers arrived, it was like receiving a physical blow. The cold, formal language on the page, detailing the end of what was once my whole world. Signing them felt like signing off on the death of the man I used to be, the life I once cherished now officially over. I tried reaching out, tried to rekindle some of the old friendships I'd neglected, but it was clear where their loyalties lay. One by one, they chose Sarah, leaving me to face the stark reality of my weekends, my life, alone. Each failed attempt at reconnecting, a reminder of the isolation my actions had wrought. Through it all, the hardest part hasn't been the loss of status, the physical toll, or even the cold shoulders from those I once considered family. It's been coming to terms with the fact that in my pursuit of something I thought I wanted, I lost everything that truly mattered. And as I sit in the silence of my apartment, the finality of the divorce papers in front of me, I'm left to wonder if the man staring back at me in the mirror can ever find redemption, or if he's destined to navigate this self-made purgatory alone. Ever notice how quick folks are to drop you when you're no longer the life of the party? That's what hit me first. The silence. Invites dried up faster than a spilled drink on a hot day. My social status, once buoyed by being one half of the happy couple, tanked. I'd become the subject of whispers and sideways glances. The guy who messed up his marriage. The fall from grace wasn't graceful. It was a nosedive. During those long, lonely nights, I'd replay my time with Eva. It dawned on me, the cold, hard truth. She'd played me like a cheap violin. Her affection was like a tap, flowing when it suited her, dry the moment I was all in. It stung, realizing I was just a pawn in her game, a temporary fix to her boredom. Figuring I needed to do something, anything to claw my way out of this pit, I joined a therapy group. Picture this, a circle of strangers, all nursing their own heartaches. I thought I'd find some solace there, maybe even a bit of redemption. But when it came my turn to share, words deserted me. The guilt, the regret, it choked me silent. Then, this one day, I bumped into a guy. Just a random encounter at a coffee shop. He's rambling about his own mess up, his own lost love. For a fleeting moment, there was this connection. Two souls adrift in the sea of regret. But even as he spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that for me, there might not be a lighthouse in the distance. The lowest point had to be sitting alone in that restaurant where Sarah and I celebrated every anniversary. Our table, our spot, it was like a museum exhibit of happier times. I half expected to see a plaque. Here sat love, once vibrant, now extinct. The pain wasn't just emotional, it was physical. A tightness in my chest, a lump in my throat. One afternoon I saw Sarah. Just a glimpse, across a busy street. Her laughter reached me, a sound I realized I'd forgotten. She was radiant, alive. And me? I was a ghost, haunting the ruins of my past. That moment, seeing her so full of life, it was both beautiful and excruciating. I started writing letters to Sarah, pages filled with apologies, confessions, pleas for forgiveness. Each letter ended the same way, sealed, stamped, but never sent. They piled up, a paper monument to my cowardice, my remorse. Reflecting on these events, I couldn't help but feel like I was circling the drain, each day blending into the next, a monochrome of regret. My attempts at redemption, at finding a sliver of peace, felt futile. The realization of my mistake, the magnitude of the pain I caused, it was overwhelming. I was living in the shadow of choices I couldn't unmake, words I couldn't unsay, and a love I couldn't undo. Starting over is a joke when every step forward feels like you're just sinking deeper into quicksand. That's where I found myself, trying to claw my way out of isolation, but every effort just pulled me further down. The city bustled around me, lives moving forward in a blur while I stood frozen in time, a ghost among the living. It hit me hard one day, that a whole year had spun by since Sarah and I split. The seasons changed, but I was stuck, trapped in a loop of what-ifs and if-onlys. Time, that relentless march, didn't care for the stagnation of a broken heart. Facing the truth was like swallowing glass. Our relationship, what I destroyed with Sarah, it was beyond repair. The dreams of fixing things, of finding our way back to each other, were just that, dreams. The damage wasn't just done, it was irrevocable. A chasm too wide to bridge. There's this moment of reckoning, when you're forced to stare down the person you've become. Mine came in the stark light of my bathroom, the mirror reflecting back a man I barely recognize. It was there, in that reflection, that the truth cut through the lies I'd been telling myself. I was the maker of my own misery, the author of my downfall. My apartment, once a home filled with love and laughter, now felt like a cell, the decor mocking reminders of a past life. Signing those divorce papers was like signing away a piece of my soul. Each stroke of the pen felt heavy, final. There in the silence of my apartment, with nothing but the echo of my own breath for company, I faced the end of a chapter, the closing of a book I'd thought would have a different ending. Trying to rebuild seemed like the logical next step. I polished up my resume, hit the job boards, went on interviews, but everywhere I went, the shadow of my past loomed, a dark cloud over every new beginning. It was as if my failures had become my shadow, impossible to shake. Walking through the city at night, the loneliness was a tangible thing, a cloak wrapped tight around me. My choices, my mistakes, had alienated me from those I cared about, leaving me to navigate the streets alone. The laughter and warmth of friendships lost whispered on the wind, a cruel reminder of what could have been. Standing on that bridge, looking out over the city, the cold wind bit at my cheeks, a physical manifestation of the internal chill. Below, the city lights sparkled, a million lives moving forward, while I was anchored in place by the weight of my regrets. It was there, in that moment, that the full realization of my situation settled in. There was no redemption for me, no second chances. The life I once had, the love I'd squandered, it was all beyond reach now. My choices had led me here, to this precipice of despair, and as I looked out over the water, I knew that my wife and I were together for 20 years when a train derailed 2 miles from our home. It was full of chlorine gas, so when it crashed, a massive toxic cloud formed. We were eating dinner with our 17-year-old son, who was telling us about his day at school. The television was off, and our cell phones were in another room. Then we heard the sirens of the fire chief's car, dragging through our neighborhood, telling everyone on a megaphone to evacuate their homes due to the toxic chemical cloud heading right for us. Once we gathered enough supplies and clothes for a few days and got in the car, we realized that we were one of the last families to leave. Trash was split all over the neighborhood from fallen trash cans, and there weren't any cars in sight. After sitting in traffic for 7 hours, half expecting the cloud to come up behind our car, we finally arrived at Camp Rafiki. It was a summer camp for children, turned into a much-needed respite for hundreds of families. We were assigned 3 cots right beside each other, among a sea of other cots. We got freshened up, and were given any toiletries we forgot at home. Meals were cooked using the camp's kitchen. It really felt like a safe haven. But that feeling would disappear for me as soon as I remembered our home was simmering in a cloud of chlorine. I'd heard stainless steel appliances melt in chlorine gas, so I was devastated. It was going to be a mess in our neighborhood for a while, and I wondered where we were going to stay. My wife started playing the piano in the room for all to hear. There was a crowd of about 30 people around her, listening intently, and even more listening from across the room. She started playing piano as a child, so it soothed her and everyone around her. I could tell she enjoyed the attention, but I was just glad she didn't feel as upset as me. Our son was talking with a group of teenagers around the foosball table. Seeing my family so calm, and even enjoying themselves, suddenly made me feel calm. I went from stressed and tense to relaxed and desperate for some sleep, so I laid on my cot and passed out. I woke up hours later. It was dark outside, and it seemed like everyone was sleeping in their cot except my wife. Her cot was empty, so I took a look around. I found her sitting cross-legged on another man's cot. He was sitting on it with her, awfully close, while she was telling him a story from her childhood. I cleared my throat and asked her to come to bed. She hesitated, and it looked like she tried to think of a reason to stay. But there wasn't any reason I would accept to allow her to continue talking to this guy late into the night. I knew her extremely well by this point, so I knew she knew how bad it was that she was up talking to this guy while I was sleeping. Back at our cots, I asked her why she was talking to him and what they said. She was embarrassed and said it wasn't a big deal. They were just getting to know each other. I asked what she now knew about him. She just said it wasn't important, and laid down to sleep. The next day, many of the survivors were playing volleyball or basketball, including me, my son, wife, and AP. After each game or point, I saw him high-five or fist-bump my wife. She was starting it too, it wasn't just him. Then I saw her go in for a hug. He looked so pleased. But then he saw me glaring at him and walked away. She turned to see me and pretended nothing was wrong. Lunch was served, and with our plates in hand, my wife suggested we sit outside. She led our son and I to the table where AP was sitting. I thought about protesting, but I didn't want to have to explain why in front of our son. I just ate food and listened to what was said. AP mentioned it would probably be one more day at the camp before everyone could return home. My wife looked sad at the thought of going home. I felt super weird when she asked AP if he was ever lonely living by himself. I didn't know how she knew he lived alone. That must have been something they spoke about while I was sleeping. He said his dog kept him company, but he and I both knew it seemed like my wife wanted to keep him company. I stood up and told them I'd like to go on a family walk. My wife had the nerve to ask me if she could stay behind to finish eating. She only had peas on her plate, and her blatant disregard for me and our son was alarming. She was already choosing AP over me. I told her to come with us now, so thankfully she did. On the walk, with our son ahead of us, I asked her what the heck she was thinking. I had to point out all the obvious ways she was flirting with AP, and she still denied that she was flirting or misbehaving. I told her I didn't want her to talk to him anymore. She didn't say anything, but agreed. That was all I needed for her to respect my wishes, even if I was being overprotective. The next day, everything seemed to be going fine, but our son went off with some teenagers for a while. When it was almost time for dinner, I went to find him. He was hanging out by the tree line, and really enjoyed talking to this one girl in particular. I was glad he got the chance to meet her. She was homeschooled in the very same neighborhood as us, but might have never met my son if it hadn't been for the chemical spill. He was feeling great about life, so I just told him to be back in a little while for dinner. When I got back to the building filled with cots and people anxious to eat, I couldn't find my wife. I also noticed pretty quickly that AP was gone too. I searched the crowded building and property around until I spotted them about 15 yards inside the tree line. There was a spot without so many sticks and brush. They were laying on a blanket, trying to stay out of my sight as I approached. I yelled to my wife that I could see her, and she was an idiot. With a raised, booming voice, I asked her what the heck she was doing. My emotions were level 10, but it was almost like I couldn't feel them. I was on autopilot on the inside because I think if my brain let me feel the full impact of this moment, I would have broken down. My wife stood up sheepishly, clearly ashamed of herself. When she got close to me, she said she was really sorry and wanted to go back with me now. I told her I couldn't just ignore the fact that she was just laying in the woods with AP. He was still laying on the blanket a short distance away, turned away from us, like he was waiting until I left to move. My paranoid brain was telling me he could have easily done something with my wife, because she was only wearing a short dress. She didn't have much clothing resistance against foolish, spontaneous decisions. I stopped her from walking away, and asked her if she just slept with AP in the woods, while I was looking for her son. She said no right away, but she looked like she was about to cry. I asked why she looked like this, but she just ran away, back to the cots. I was getting extremely annoyed, and refused to even speak to AP. My wife was acting like someone who suddenly had no idea how to behave like an adult. I decided as I followed her that she was at least having an emotional affair, and consciously decided to sneak into the woods with him, where they may or may not have had sex. This was grounds for divorce, and it never would have happened if the train didn't derail. That night, as our son slept, I woke up my wife and got her to confess. They did have sex, but it only lasted all but 5 minutes, and she completely regretted it. They waited so long to go into the woods that it literally ended right before I found them. I can't explain how terrible I felt at this moment. I felt like my home was gone, and now my family was too. Then my wife added that she knew AP before this. She'd been over to his house to welcome him to the neighborhood, and a few other times when I was at work. I was fuming. She said they never did anything before this, but I found that very hard to believe because now, in an emergency situation with her own family, she slept with him. I went over to AP as he slept and whacked him over the head with his hardcover book a few times. He was alarmed. Then I had to make myself stop, so I just went outside to jog around the property. I planned out how I was going to separate from and divorce my wife. When we were cleared to return to our neighborhood, I told her I was going to file for divorce, so she needed to stay somewhere else. She bawled and cried and begged me to forgive her for our son's sake, so she could come home with us and help clean up the mess left behind, so our lives could return to normal. She said 5 minutes of meaningless, mistake sex shouldn't be enough to end 20 years of marriage. I told her it most certainly was, and said she needed to have a conversation with our son, explaining why she wasn't going to be living with us anymore. Our son despised her. He found it extremely hard to believe that I would just break up with her for no reason, which is all she told him. I didn't care if she planned to go with AP or what, but she did tell me she was planning to call her dad. For months later, the house I now share with my son was fully stored, with the melted appliances and wiring replaced. I told my son by this point what really happened so he might be more prepared for his date and future. Obviously, he couldn't think of his mom the same way after that. He was hurt by her actions too, and he let her know about it when she called me in tears, asking to come back home. She hadn't contacted me or our son in that entire time, but she justified that by saying she didn't want to bother us. I told her I already knew from her dad that she didn't stay with him like she said, and as her husband nearly ex, I deserved to know where she spent the past 4 months. She admitted she'd been with AP some of that time, but she just wanted to come home now. In reality, she'd been staying in AP's uncle's shed, while his house was repaired. Once his house was ready to be moved into, he dumped her, because 4 months in a shed was all the time he needed with her. That's when our son grabbed the phone and told her he didn't want his father to take her back, because he deserved better. Then he hung up on her, and I never answered her calls again. OP, your wife's behavior was extremely selfish, inconsiderate, and disrespectful. She found a single man and started talking to him like she was a single woman, even though you were always somewhere nearby. I can only imagine how upset and betrayed you must have been. I am proud of you for how you handled this terrible situation. You refused to go home with her because her behavior and decisions were unforgivable. She most likely had slept with this man before, and even if she didn't, there was still a connection between them that she never expected you to know about. Your son was right, you do deserve better than that. 20 years should have meant more to your wife. Her loyalty should have been unbreakable. I am glad you and your son managed to get through this together. I wish you both the best of luck and success in life. Thank you for sharing this story. Now let's get into our next story for today. At the age of 38, I still didn't have any children of my own. I was waiting until I knew I had the right woman, and it was the right time. That's when I met my girlfriend for 2 short years. She was 34 and had 2 daughters from a failed marriage. She seemed like a woman who was reeled into a long-term relationship with a bad man due to an unexpected pregnancy and her mother's poor advice. I decided to continue seeing her, and the more we got to talk, the more I fell for her. She was incredibly smart and loved history. She read out loud to her kids every night and was going to school online to earn her teaching degree. Even though life threw her curved balls, she was trying hard, which was what I respected most about her. Things changed after her sister passed away unexpectedly. My girlfriend became overwhelmed with grief. She felt like she could die at any minute and found it disturbing that all humans ever do is waste time until they inevitably die. She started talking more about the end of the world and clicked on any YouTube videos that mentioned potential war or weapon launches. At night before bed, she started saying she hoped I wouldn't die before her, because she wouldn't be able to handle it. She developed this fear of blood clots forming in her arms, legs, or neck, so she would jump up several times while we watched a movie or relaxed, just to march in place and move her arms around. I realized she had a problem, so I asked her if she'd be willing to seek treatment. She didn't want to go to counseling, but she did believe in God, so I suggested she ask the church for help of some kind. My girlfriend was skeptical she could handle any other weekly activity besides raising the children and doing online classes. I assured her I would watch her kids on the night she went to the church, if they could make her feel better about life. She took my offer, and told me they assigned her a weekly arts and crafts class to teach small children. She was really excited about it, and things started to get better immediately. She seemed more calm, and things stopped stressing her out as much. A few weeks later, though, something changed again. She was calm, but also less observant and sharp. Things that normally wouldn't have confused her suddenly did. She laughed out loud more often. She stopped marching in place, but would go outside randomly to walk around the house a few times. It took me a month before I went outside while she was walking to watch her. I saw her take a puff from a vape pen. She coughed a little. I immediately thought it was a medical vape cartridge, which wasn't legal in our state. I walked up to her and asked how she was smoking one of these. She was hesitant to say anything, and tried to show me it wasn't what I thought it was. But in doing so, I discovered it was. I made a confident guess that each time she stepped outside was to vape without me knowing. She admitted it wasn't just for that, but she enjoyed the walking too. I asked how she was getting these cartridges, and she didn't want to tell me. She said it was no concern of mine, and I should just let her continue what she's doing, because she feels better now. I took this time to mention that we hadn't made love in quite some time, so I was worried that she was getting love from someone else, and that maybe this person was also giving her cartridges. Her jaw dropped, and she denied this, but I could tell instantly that I guessed what was happening. She wouldn't admit it, though, and why wouldn't she? If she refused to admit it, she might get to keep living in my house with me serving as her free babysitter. I forgot to mention she was desperate for a place to live when we met, so I let her move in with me pretty fast. Now I felt like a fool because she was up to something. I ordered a GPS tracker to put on her car. The next time she said she was going to her class, I anxiously watched her location on my phone. I was infuriated at this point, sure that she was taking advantage of me. I watched until she arrived at the crappy motel across from the cemetery. I asked her mom to come watch the kids, and told her what was going on. She was surprised and didn't want to believe me, but she did come watch the kids. I got to the hotel and started filming on my phone. I banged on the door in front of her car and heard a scramble inside. When AP opened the door, he only had a towel around his waist, and I could see my wife's eyes peeking out from behind the bed. I told her I could see her, and felt my heart twist like a pretzel. I asked if this was the guy she got her cartridges from, and he said it was none of my business. I snapped, screaming in his face that it was most certainly my business. AP just put his hands up and told my wife it was time to go home to daddy. Outside, she told me she only lied to protect me and the kids because she didn't trust this guy. There were so many things wrong with that statement. I pointed out that she was a complete idiot for meeting this guy alone in a hotel room if she didn't trust him. Secondly, I said she didn't need to protect us from that guy. She just didn't want me to know she was sleeping with him in exchange for illegal drugs, all taking place while I watched her kids as she could go to the church. I screamed that she was just using me for a place to live, but I knew now she was a horrible mistake. I didn't love her because she just proved she didn't love or respect me. She was selling herself for drugs. I left her there in the motel parking lot. I didn't care if she followed me, but she did. She heard me telling her mom and kids to get the flip out of my house. When they yelled in protest, I called her a lying cheater, among other truthful insults. Eventually, they got the gist and started packing their cars with children and stuff. While they did so, my girlfriend tried telling her mom I didn't want them to live in my house anymore, because I was selfish and evil. I disproved that by showing her mother the video I took. Her mother was furious, and told her daughter I should leave her, after the extreme dishonesty and betrayal. It was just a short while later, while they were all living at her mom's house, that my ex was arrested on drug charges. OP, I am sorry your girlfriend convinced you to let her move in with her kids, only to prove she was a selfish and disturbed woman. She could have resolved these issues and sought help properly, but she took the route that would benefit her the most without consideration for her kids or you. I don't believe she realized how important it was for her to avoid two major things: illegal activities as a mother, and infidelity as a girlfriend, who depended on her boyfriend's trust and generosity. She ruined whatever chance you all had for a happy life together, simply because she couldn't handle her grief and mental obstacles in an honorable way. You have a second chance to find true love and have your own children. I appreciate you sharing this story as an example to our viewers. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to both stories for today.